Welcome everybody. I don't know if anybody's on today, but I thought I would do a live stream. It's kind of late right now, but I thought possibly there are some moms out there that are up and possibly up with their babies, breastfeeding, and so I thought I would go live. I thought that what I would talk about today is Foremilk and Hindmilk, which is the two. A lot of times we think of our milk in two parts. We think of it as Hindmilk and Foremilk. And if you would ask most moms, they'll say the Foremilk, is the milk in the front, and the Hindmilk is the milk in the back, and that's the fattier milk. And actually, we have taught that for quite some time, but we have found with new research some more updated information, which I will put a link to this discussion in the description box so that you can check out more information on that, just because I think it is important to keep up to date on information so that we can continue to help each other and to help moms out there, just to continue. It's important to continue learning information and sharing that with moms. And one of the biggest things we worry about is whether we should switch sides, and I get a lot of questions about that. Should we switch sides? Should we switch should we like time the baby on the breast and make sure that the baby feeds on one side and then move to the next side? And then the concern of baby not getting enough fat in the milk came into play, and so then we talk about letting the baby breastfeed on one breast until the baby stops, and then you can offer the second breast, but to let that baby really empty that first breast before you offer the second breast, which is still what we recommend. We don't recommend timing the baby or necessarily switching sides until the baby lets go. But one of the reasonings for that was basically to say that we don't want babies to not get enough of that fattier milk, because that fattier milk tends to be in the back of the breast, and so the longer the baby breastfeeds, the more chances they are of getting that fattier milk. But what they have found is really how it all works out is that fattier milk, a baby that breastfeeds more often is going to get more fat. So the longer a baby breastfeeds, the more often they breastfeed, the higher fat content they're going to get. If a baby is breastfeeding every, say, 3 hours, they may not get quite as much fattier milk as a baby who's breastfeeding more often, because that fattier milk is then distributed throughout the breast more. And like I said, I'm going to put more information to that, a few articles about that below so that you guys can check that out. But I thought that was interesting. And like I said, it was some new research that they have found, basically just really wanting to help moms who are concerned with whether or not their baby is getting enough of the fat that they need from the breast, from the milk. And really, we don't need to be concerned with that. What we need to be concerned with mainly is that the baby is feeding often. The more that baby feeds, the better that baby is going to do as far as weight gain goes, as far as thriving and doing well health-wise. So the goal is to breastfeed baby on demand. So as much as that baby wants to feed, that baby can feed. If that baby, feeds every 3 hours, and that's how the baby's feeding, and they're doing fine, you're not having any challenges, then every 3 hours is fine. If a baby is feeding every hour and a half, that's fine as well, because breast milk is in the system for only an hour and a half. They may find that they need to breastfeed more, that they're hungry, when that milk is gone and when it goes through their system. But a baby who is experiencing some challenges, maybe they're extra sleepy and they're just not emptying the breast. And when they begin to feed, they fall asleep. So that's where we start saying, okay, we want to make sure that baby is feeding often enough, make sure that baby is gaining weight, make sure that baby's actively eating. Again, switching sides is not important. The most important thing is that baby empties the breast. So you put them on one breast, let them feed as long as they need to until they stop. You can then offer the second breast, and if they refuse, then that's fine. You would just go back to that breast in the end, or the next feeding. But if a baby will take the second breast at that feeding, then you would offer that second breast. You still would begin on that second breast at the next feeding, just because, they ate from that breast last. So you can use like a bracelet or something to show, kind of remind yourself which side the baby fed on last, or which side the baby needs to feed on next, whichever works for you. But when a baby, like I said, when a baby has challenges, that's when we're more concerned about whether or not that baby is feeding well. If they're not gaining weight properly, we want to look at how often they're feeding, and are they actively feeding. So we're looking for those things only for babies that are having trouble, whether it be a letdown issue, whether it be their weight gain, whether it be they seem to not be satisfied at the breast, whatever it might be. Then we might start looking at how they're breastfeeding, and how often they're breastfeeding. And what we really have begun to do is talk about looking at it from a viewpoint of how many times they feed. We want them to feed anywhere between 8 to 12 times a day. Not necessarily are we looking for every 2 to 3 hours. We're just looking for 8 to 12 feeds a day, and that can vary from baby to baby. It could be every 1 hour for one baby. It could be, and 1 hour is extreme, but it could be every 1 hour for a certain amount of time, and then they go 3 or 4 hours in between. Whatever the case, the most important thing is that they're getting 8 to 12 feeds a day. If a baby is feeding 8 times a day, which is every 3 hours, and they seem to be struggling with weight gain, or they're having trouble with a letdown. I see I have it. Does it hurt? So I imagine you're talking about breastfeeding, and it should not be painful when you breastfeed. If it hurts, then the baby is possibly not latched correctly. It could be, sometimes a mom will describe her letdown as painful, and that's a lot of times just dependent on, the mother. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses or my contacts, and so I have to pull the camera way up to here. Do you feel the teeth? Again, if a baby is feeding correctly on the breast, if they're latched correctly, you should not feel their teeth, no. Most babies don't have teeth for a while, and for me, my babies didn't get their teeth until much farther, when they were a lot older. But for babies who do get their teeth sooner, they have to put their tongue over the bottom teeth, and just the way that they have to suck properly, they cannot, they cannot, so no. My baby is really tired but hungry too. I can tell she wants to eat, but, sorry. I guess it wasn't so good to not have my glasses on here. I'm having trouble seeing okay, every time but hungry too. I can tell she wants to eat, but is refusing to latch. She keeps pushing my breast and kicking. Okay, so that is another, so you said she's really tired but hungry too. How often is she feeding? That's one very important point. And a lot of times when a baby is going through growth spurts and they're kind of in pain during those growth spurts, they go through growth spurts every couple of weeks. And during that time period, they can be in a little bit of pain, growing pains. And so they can pull at the breast and, squeeze at the breast. And a lot of times too, because of growth spurts, they might start feeding more often, and then they're trying to get the milk flow to, maybe the breast is not as full or as fast as they want it to come. But a lot of times pulling at the breast can just be the baby just irritated. And as far as like tired and hungry, I think I would want to know how often the baby's feeding. How old is your baby? How often is your baby feeding? Those are questions that I would have to ask to help answer that. Like I said, a baby, it's normal for them to feed anywhere between every 1 to 3 hours. 8 times, and she's 2 months and a few days. Okay, so she eats like 8 times a day. So 8 times a day is about every 3 hours. So like I said earlier, okay, so about every 3 hours is 8 times a day. 12 times a day would be every 2 hours. And so what I would suggest is, I guess I should ask this too. Are you waking your baby to feed, or is she waking and feeding? Sometimes if she's really hungry, if a baby is really hungry, they can get to a point of being so hungry that they don't want to latch. They just want to eat. And the other question is, does she ever get a bottle or any other type of nipple? Because sometimes if she's been sucking on a pacifier or any of that, okay, so she usually wakes on her own. So I would look for some feeding cues. Look for licking the lips. Okay, look for licking the lips. Look for rapid eye movement. The eyes could be closed. Rapid eye movement. Hands fisted at her side. Look for some early feeding cues, and I would try feeding her when she's still maybe sleepy, not when she's to a point of crying. I don't know if she does that, but it kind of sounds like a growth spurt to me. They go through growth spurts every 2 weeks, and during that time period for like a couple of days, they get very fussy. During those time periods, they are increasing your milk supply. So sometimes your milk supply isn't meeting the demand they want at that moment. That can cause them to pull at the breast. That can cause them to, get irritated and pull off the breast even, or push you away. They kind of like are pulling your breast one way and pushing you the other with their hands. All of those are just part of when they're really irritable and they're going through that growth spurt. They're kind of in pain. And so that can cause them to be really irritable and hard to breastfeed during that time period. And it lasts about 24 hours, but it can cover 2 days, if you know what I mean. So like it could start at like 3 o'clock on a Monday until 3 o'clock on a Tuesday kind of thing. I don't know if that helps, if I'm making any sense, but it is normal. I remember every single one of my babies doing that, pulling at the breast. I thought it was because my breast was empty. And even sometimes you can tell your breast is empty, like there's not any more milk left in there because they've been just feeding constantly. Do you recommend I try waking her up now and try to feed? Well, this is the thing too. Sometimes they're getting milk and we can't tell that they're getting milk, but I guess if she's 2 months, you probably can tell when she's emptied it. How is she doing weight-wise? Is she gaining weight? And I would also watch her diaper output. Is she going through at least 6 diapers a day, 6 wet diapers a day? So what I would do right now is I would pull out 6 diapers, whatever time it is for you right now. For me, it is, oh gosh, why did I not bring it's midnight for me right now. I don't know what time it is there, but pull out your diapers and look at your clock, and 24 hours from now, so it would be, for me, if it was 24 hours from now, it would be midnight tomorrow. If she goes through all 6 of those diapers in that 24-hour period, then she's getting plenty of milk. So that's kind of your clue. if she's getting enough and if she's gaining weight. We're looking for a half an ounce to an ounce a day. And so if she's going through those diapers, which is what I would do today, I would pull out those diapers and watch that for the next 24 hours, feed her on demand, try to feed her sooner. That's what I usually do. I heard you say it in one of your other videos. Okay. What I would recommend is try to feed her more often. I know it might sound like, overwhelming, but maybe try to feed her before she's hungry, if you know what I mean. Because sometimes when they're not really hungry, they don't mind taking the time to latch correctly and taking the time for the milk to come out. But if they're really hungry, they just want to eat now. Just kind of think of how you feel when you've gone a really long time without eating, and then you sit down and you eat, and you almost don't even, you can like scarf it down so quickly. So what could happen is that she's really hungry and it's just not coming out fast enough. The other thing, it's hard because if I could observe you feeding her and I could observe what she's doing, that's another thing, is if you can get someone to observe you feeding her and her doing that, pulling at the breast. Sometimes the letdown is really strong, and that letdown can make them pull off because it's like spraying in their mouth, because you're so full, you have so much milk, and it's just like spraying in her mouth, and that's frustrating her. So sometimes you can hand express or pump a little bit of that milk out to get past that initial letdown, and then when the milk slows down a little bit, she is a little bit better, and it makes it easier for her to feed. So I would try, making a few little adjustments. Try to feed her, and again, I'm talking about not timing, but because you're having this challenge, I would, it's really hard, because I would say for the next 24 hours, feed her the best you can, as often as you can, and try to feed her when, before she's really, really hungry. So maybe if she normally eats every 3 hours, and this is something you can even write down every time she eats, for the next 24 hours, just really kind of chart her, kind of see what she's doing. How often is she eating? How many diapers is she going through? How long does she feed? Is she actively swallowing? Do you hear her swallowing? Kind of chart those for the next 24 hours, and then you can kind of gauge what to do tomorrow, type of thing. So if today, for the next 24 hours, you watch how often she's feeding, and she's feeding every 3 hours, then you could you could start saying, okay, well, let me feed her every 2. If you're feeding her every 3 hours and her diaper output is good, then I really wouldn't worry too much. And if she's gaining weight properly too, I wouldn't overly worry. Just try some different things. Like I said, if she's feeding every 3 hours, try feeding her every 2 and see if that helps. If she's feeding every 2 hours, try feed her every hour and a half, see if that helps. And sometimes they go through periods where they cluster feed as well. So she might be really fussy at the breast.
It's 12 o'clock.
She may feed every hour, and then she goes 4 or 5 hours before she feeds again. So you can try some of those things, and maybe what I can try to do is write it down for you. And that could be a big deal right there. That can make her pull off. If it's spraying in her mouth, it's upsetting her. It's like choking her. I would have to ask you, do you feel you're let down? Because usually if your body, you'll know when it's time to feed. The upper lip would be her pediatrician. They would be the one that would take care of that. Okay, so while you feed her, you feel you're let down. Typically the letdown is within the first, I want to say, anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. Like it's within that first minute or so, or 2 minutes of feeding. You'll feel that for me, every woman would describe it different, but it felt like pins and needles to me. Okay, so you don't feel it when you hand. Have you ever pumped with a pump? And when you hand express, is she right there? Are you able to look at her, and are you able to listen to her cry? Sometimes if you record her cry, record it on your phone, and you are able to look at a picture of her or have her in front of you, that can help that letdown. Because a lot of times that letdown, it's a hormone that releases that milk. And so if we feel like if you just hand expressing it or you're using a pump, you feel like it's just a machine. It's not the same release. So if you can record her cry or have a picture of her in front of you and be looking at that and picturing her actually feeding, and try not to be thinking about the pump itself. Hand expressing is kind of hard not to, because you are using your hands and you're trying to watch to see if you get the milk out. But if you're using a pump, try not to pay attention to those things, and that will usually bring the letdown. If you don't feel it when you're hand expressing it, you may not, it probably didn't come yet. What you could do is, if no matter what you do, you can't get the letdown when you're pumping, which it should. It's like I said, it's like a pins and needles feeling for me. That's what best way I could describe it. If you're not getting that with pumping, you can massage your nipples a little bit before. Like I said, listen to her cry, because her crying can make that letdown come. And so those things can help. And like I said, once you get that initial letdown, now another thing that will help a lot with the spraying is feeding her more often. Because if you're really full, because she's feeding every 3 hours, or if she's really she's not very routine, and she's just feeding one, it might be every hour, and then it's every 2 or every 3. So your breasts get kind of full, it's going to spray. So anytime you notice your breasts are feeling full, then it probably will spray in her mouth. So I would say feeding more often should eliminate that issue, or should help with that issue. And also, if you have to hand express to get past the letdown, that might help as well. All of these things will really help. If you have to hand express a little bit or pump a little bit or whatever you have to do, if you're able to feed her a little bit before she's hungry, like starving. So breast milk is in the system for 90 minutes, which is an hour and a half. So if you start feeding her at that hour and a half mark, she's not starving. So if first of all, your breasts aren't going to spray, they shouldn't be overly full at that point. It should be a little bit easier for her. And if it isn't, she'll be less stressed about it because she's not as hungry. If she's panicky and she's really hungry, then it just makes it worse. So I hope that answers those questions for you. It is so normal. It happens with every single baby, and you're still in those early weeks where she's kind of establishing your milk supply, and she's still learning and you're still learning. And so your milk supply is still adjusting, because she's going to constantly be increasing it through her growth spurts. And while she's doing that, she can be irritable as well. So there's a lot of little things. It is rough, those first few weeks, but it gets easier and easier. It really does get easier and easier. But sometimes it gets harder before it gets better. And especially if you have some challenges, like she's not emptying the breast. So I would say, like, if she's really a sleepy baby, you may need to wake her. No, if I ask. And the tongue tie could also be a very big issue as well. So that can be a big issue as well, because she's not able to control the milk because she can't do her tongue. A lot of times it's I want to say, she's not tongue. Oh, okay, lip. Okay. My son was tongue. But either way, that would really make a big difference as well. However she's tied, whether it's the lip or the tongue, it definitely will affect your latch. It will be more painful. It should not be painful, but it will be and can be if there's a lip or tongue tie. If the pediatrician doesn't do it, some IBCLCs can refer you. And if you want, if you give me the area that you live in, I could do some research for you and send you some information. Let me see if I can find something. What I can do is in the description, I will put my email, and which I think it's on, I'm pretty sure, but in the comment section, just comment. I don't know if it shows your questions in the comments. And California is great usually for support. They have the best breastfeeding rates. Okay, I'll do some research and see what I can find. And then I can email it to you. So in the comments below, put your email for me, and I will see what I can find. Because let me ask you this: do you qualify for WIC, or are you on WIC already? Let me start with that. And like I said, just leave your email for me, and I will see what I can find. Sometimes, okay, so let's start. So like I said, sometimes pediatricians will do it. Sometimes IBCLCs do it. And sometimes you have to go to a dentist. I'm trying to think where I went for my son. I'm trying to think if it was a dentist. I can't even remember now. My pediatrician didn't believe me, so I had to look further because he wasn't going to do anything about it. And I'm trying to remember who I went to see, but I'm in Michigan, so it wouldn't matter anyway. But WIC. Okay, WIC does, I don't know if you've worked with WIC, but they do have breastfeeding peer counselors, and they can refer you as well to not only IBCLCs in the area, but also issues with tongue tie and where to look for that. So be sure to use, because they can also observe her feeding and see if it's the lip tie, which I'm really thinking that might be a big, the biggest portion of the problem. But feeding her more often will definitely help, just because if she's doesn't have to work as hard, it might help. And you can even try, I don't know if you have, but again, I would maybe meet with your WIC breastfeeding peer counselor and have them observe the baby. And sometimes they have IBCLCs that can observe as well there at WIC. And if they see a lip tie and they see that it is definitely a problem, they can kind of check that. How much did she weigh at birth, and what does she weigh now at the most recent? That's kind of gives me a clue. She didn't know what a lip tie was. Well, that's kind of weird. I'm definitely gonna do some research for you, and see what I can find, and I'll email you. I'm trying to think what else I can have you do, that might help. I was gonna say a nipple shield, but I want to kind of know what her weight is and how her weight gain has been. So she's 7'1" and 8, so 7 pounds on July 14th, and a month and a half later she's 8 pounds. So 7'1" and 8'14". I have to figure that out, how many. Let's see, I'm trying to think if she's, so what does the doctor say about her weight? Did the doctor feel that she was at a good weight? Because that would have been about 6 weeks old, I want to say. Is that about what she was, 6 weeks old? And so at 7-1, so she was born at 7-1. When she left the hospital, what was she when you took her home? Did she lose weight? Because that is pretty normal. Because you kind of are looking for, I want to say, a pound a month. If you do an ounce a day, I want to say it's about a pound, half an ounce to an ounce a day. She went to the Cuba, I think she not 6 something. Okay, that's what I was thinking. She probably went home at 6 something. It sounds like she's okay. If she went home at 6 pounds something, which is what I'm assuming, because if she was 7 pounds at birth, she probably went home at like 6, because they usually lose a little bit of weight. So she was probably 6 pounds something. She wouldn't have been most likely 6 pounds, but she would have weighed less than 7, most likely, when she went home. So 6 pounds, let's say she was 6, let's say she went to 6:14 or something. On July 20th, she was, yeah, that's not very much, but that's only 1 week. That's actually really good. No, that's actually excellent, because that means she was back to birth weight at 1 week, and we're looking for back to birth weight at 2 weeks old. But it just seems like possibly it slowed down some. So she was 7'2". We're looking for, she gained a pound. I would say she's doing okay. That doesn't sound bad at all. It sounds pretty good. So like you said, a little on the low end. I would say she's probably gaining, and I could figure it out if I have a calculator in front of me, but maybe she's gaining about a half an ounce a day, which is not bad at all. So try feeding her more often. That would be my thing. Check her diaper output for the next 24 hours and see how her diapers are. You'll know right away if she's going through 6 diapers, because you'll be like, okay, I'm definitely, going through more than 6 diapers a day. 2 to 3 of those stool, and anything that's larger, any stool that's larger than a quarter is considered a bowel movement. So you're looking for 2 to 3 of those or more. It can happen every single time you're changing a diaper. So that's not anything to worry about, but that is. And let me think. So like I said, do that every day. Feed her more often, because that will probably help. And then if all else fails, you can try a nipple shield, which, okay, oh, that's right. I think you had mentioned that. Yes, I remember you making that comment on one of my other videos, that which again, she's 2 months old, so that can slow down. But I would say every 2 days isn't horrible. But let's try feeding her more often. That's what I'm going to say, is try your best to feed her a little more often. So try to aim for 1.5 to 2 hours. And because she's struggling, let me ask you, are you in a lot of pain when she feeds? You mentioned that it's painful. How are you? Has she damaged your nipples? Are you in pain when you feed her? Are you cracked or bleeding or any of that? Because of course I wouldn't want you to be in pain either. And if she's not able to latch correctly, that's not good. Okay, so and is it extremely painful? Do you see blood? Is it cracked? Sores? Let me know on that too. No, they sometimes crack. Okay, so I want to say we got to get her in to check for this lip tie. She's not able to latch correctly, probably because of that, so that might be why you're feeling it. And the other thing is make sure she's getting her whole, as much as she can of your breast in her mouth. Again, this is hard if she has a lip tie. So I will definitely look into that for you and try to get you some information on where you can look for that. And then I think you should possibly, if you can, get in to see an IBCLC that can look at that as well and give you some, you know, pointers. And if the feeding is really painful, I would recommend a nipple shield. And I don't know if you know what that is, but I do have a video on it. So if you haven't or don't have one or not sure what it is, you can check out that video. It's about weaning from a nipple shield, but I do have some pictures of what a nipple shield looks like. You can walk into any Target or Walmart or Babies R Us, you know, like any store. Pharmacies should have them as well. They're just kind of a thin silicone nipple shield that goes over your nipple, and it will make it a lot less painful. The only thing I would say to be careful of is you've got to make sure that she is emptying that breast. Sometimes with a nipple shield, it can make it harder for them to get that breast emptied, but it sounds like she may be already struggling with emptying the breast. So what I would suggest for you for now, until we can get this situation taken care of, is to pump after each feeding or to hand express after each feeding to make sure that your breasts are empty. Because what she's doing now could affect your milk supply later, and all of a sudden you're having a milk supply issue when she's 3 or 4 months, I'm going to say, you're having a milk supply issue, and it could be due to the struggle that she's having that first month. But if you're able to pump after each feeding just to make sure the breast is empty, you don't have to pump a long period of time, but just making sure that that breast is empty, that you empty it. You can put that milk in the freezer. It lasts up to a year. That will just ensure that your milk supply stays up with her, because we do not want anything to happen to your milk supply. Picking a flange size. Okay. Okay, yeah, I will, I'll see what I can do on that. Definitely, I will check that for you. I'm really glad that you came on and I was able to answer some of your questions. And I will definitely get back to you with what I can find as far as referrals. And I will see what I can find of IBCLCs in the area as well. I don't know Los Angeles that well, so if there's I don't know how it's separated. So if there's like areas that that are too far or whatever, just let me know if I need to like look in a specific area. So I hope I would definitely check her diaper output, make sure that she's going through her 6 diapers, and try that feeding a little more often, and then try a nipple shield and the pumping after, a hand expression after if you need to. But like the most important thing is making sure she's getting enough milk. And that, that's the most important thing. And then I'll work on this, and hopefully we can get you taken care of and things can work for you. Thank you for watching and for coming on. And I will talk to you very soon. Good night.